listening. That is 917-932-1607 and press the number 1. This is indicative if you have a question or comment for either myself or Dishan. Or, guys, if you don't want to call in, you can join us in our chat room. That's right, and I will take your questions and comments, right? Just log on at blogtalkradio.com/the certain one. That's blogtalkradio.com/the certain one, all right? And then I will just read your question or comment on the air. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and just read her bio. For some, she doesn't need an introduction, but she's prolific. As I mentioned, she's a prolific writer, and she's a wonderful playwright. And she was married at the age of 16. I got to point that out, okay? And she became known as the youngest first lady or pastor's wife, if you will, at the age of 17. Now, she is currently the national and Essence best-selling author of Diary of a Mad First Lady, which came out on the Urban Books in March 2010, The Preacher's Wifey, Urban Books, and that came out February 2013, and My Baby Is Not a Mistake, which we're going to talk about today, okay? She's also, as I mentioned, is a nationally recognized playwright for plays such as Everything That Looks Good Ain't Good for You, or Is Love Supposed to Hurt? I Can't If I Want to. And her latest play, which is based off her book, Diary of a Mad First Lady. Her next book releases are scheduled to be released in 2015 with Applause Publishing, and that's going to be Diary of a Mad First Lady Part 2, long time awaiting. And Brown Girl Publishing, Let's Get It On. And at the helm of her literary giant, everybody knows these two ladies, Toria Christopher Murray and Rashonda Tate Billingsley, two powerhouses in and of themselves, all right? So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and bring Dishan Washington on. We're having a good time tonight. I hope you guys are, too. Again, that number to call in is 917-932-1607. Press the number 1. It's indicative that you have a question and comment for either myself or Dishan. Here we go. Welcome to the show, Dishan. How are you?
Hi, I'm well. How are you?
I'm great. I'm glad to have you. Can you hear me? We are having problems tonight.
Can you hear me?
Gotcha. Got you. Okay.
Okay.
All right. I know it's your first time here at a certain one, so welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. I'm reading your book. And first of all, I just want to thank you for your transparency, first of all. And you start off with truth. You're an author. So you could have embellished the story any way you want to. But you chose to tell the truth. And I thank you and applaud you for that, sharing your testimony via book. So, Dishan, why did you feel the need to write this, My Baby Is Not a Mistake?
Well, the main reason is because I was accustomed to writing stories about my life, but wrapping them in the shell of fiction. The Diary of a Mad First Lady and The Preacher's Wifey, both of those books are loosely based on my life. And so this particular book, I wanted people to know this is the real me. People who've had an opportunity to hear me speak about my novels, they know that those books are based on my life, but this was in no way, shape, form, or fashion a story that I wanted to write as fiction, because initially when I first found out I was pregnant, I was very embarrassed, which is what I talk about in the book. I dealt with an overwhelming amount of guilt and shame, and I figured to myself, if I'm able to make it out of this, I'm going to try to help others who have had children out of wedlock, especially those of us who have held very high positions in the church arena. And such as myself, I was not just the first lady at my last church. I was actually the co-pastor alongside my ex-husband. And the last thing that people expected me to do would be, of course, to get pregnant out of wedlock by a man I barely knew. So I felt it very important to talk about it, because if it's not being pregnant, it's something that we all deal with. There's something that we all have experienced. And a lot of times, people in the church, they put people on pedestals as if, they are perfect, as if they are God Jr. And I thought it was very important, because I used to be one of those people. I used to be very self-righteous. And that situation brought me all the way back down to where I belong. which was in a place of humility. So that is the ultimate reason why I decided to not embellish this story.
Oh, won't he do it? God will bring you into a place of humility. He really will. And, you know, Dishan, I love your testimony. That's what I call it. I don't want to call it a book or a novel. It's your testimony. I love your humility, and I'm glad you wrote it. You're just so transparent. And I'm sitting here reading it, and I can really see these things with such clarity. You did a phenomenal job in writing it. And
Thank you.
And let's talk to us. And you use a good example about Samson. The red lights were there. And I get a lot of women to listen to my show. And if you're married to or single or divorced, listen to us. Really tune into this segment tonight. And I hope you did chat. Call your friend, your girlfriend up, and just tune into this. My baby is not a mistake. Now, Dishan, you and I, because I did too, we grew up in church. We know the word. We know these things. And yet here we are. And you're right in your book. Everybody has sinned. Everybody has made a mistake. No one is without sin. You're right.
Right.
So, and I like how all these things, number one, let's talk about this. Your premiere of your movie was taking place. Oh, my God. And I'm sitting here writing. I'm jumping in the bed like, oh, my goodness. And at the most pivotal moment of your life, and here's a red flag. This young man, this brother, is not sharing in one of the highlights of your life.
Right.
So how did that make you feel, Dishan, that moment, and what kind of advice? Let's hold that moment right there. Maybe someone listening and they have this, they're in the apex of their lives, and someone may not belong in their life. The red flag is there. How can we not ignore that red flag? How can we become strong and say, hey, you're showing me who you are, and I'm going to accept you for what you are, and I'm going to end this. Because you started out good. You said, I'm going to end it, and it is what it is, and God is saying this. But somehow or another, we took it to another level. So,
it was, I will say that my daughter was actually conceived the day before the premiere. At the premiere, when I talk about in the book how he was just very distant, standoffish, people were noticing. I, in that moment, felt like, okay, this is confirmation that this is not who I need to be with. You know, I was wanting someone to celebrate me. At the same time, I was dealing with a lot of things emotionally. I had just experienced the death of 4 of my relatives, and I don't deal with death very well. And so I had a lot of different things going on within emotionally. And the red flags came way prior to the premiere. I am just one of those people. I believe the good in people, even when they're showing me the bad. And that's just the way I am. I've always been that way. I always root for the underdog, just wanting people to change and wanting people to be different. And I think at that time, he served as a time filler. Just somebody that I could see every now and then. I didn't want to be bothered all the time, and he was good for, not being around all the time. And so when I wanted to go out or when I wanted to be bothered, he was somebody that I called, but I never really got an opportunity to know him because I honestly didn't really care to know him like that. But, again, sometimes as women, when we get emotional, particularly once a month, our estrogen levels go up. Those are the times when we have to be really, really careful. And I talked about that in another chapter. Everything is not about sinning. Some things is just the way we're made, we're designed. These emotions that we have, they are not saved and Holy Ghost filled, okay? So we have to be real about that. So there are going to be certain times of the month that our emotions, our hormones go out of control. And in those moments, if we are trying to walk a certain life, be a certain path, we have to be careful and make sure that we surround ourselves around people who will hold us accountable so that we do not become slaves to our emotions and those hormones that start raising. But anyway, at the premiere was when I decided this would be the last time I would talk to this man. That's what I was thinking to myself, not knowing that my daughter had been conceived the night before. And so I decided, this is it. I don't want to be bothered anymore, and I want to just focus on my career. Unfortunately for me, 2.5 weeks later, I discovered that I was pregnant. And that was just very difficult for me to grasp it. I remember having a dream. I knew it before I even tested. And I went to a Women's Hope Medical Clinic in Alabama. Very, very dynamic clinic. That's where people go when they're considering abortion, because I'm very transparent about that as well in the book. My initial reaction, because of my reputation, because of me being so concerned with what people were going to say and what they were going to think about me, my initial reaction was, I have to get rid of this baby before people find out. So my mother said, why don't you go and talk to the counselors? Just do it for me. And so I went and did it for her. And it was the day that I went there and confirmed the pregnancy was also the day that I decided, you know what, maybe I shouldn't do the abortion. Maybe I can, just maybe, I can have a positive outcome with this situation. And so it's been over a year ago. My daughter is over a year old now.
Yes.
And I waited purposefully to release it because I wanted to talk about how I got over it. After, you know, of course, if you continue to read the book, you read, you know, in great detail what happened and the days that I spent, you know, crying and being depressed and so on and so forth. But at the end of the book, I talk about how to overcome that depression, that guilt, that shame, and to realize that regardless to how my daughter got here, she is not a mistake. There is a purpose and a plan for her life. I may not live to see it, but there is definitely a purpose and plan for her life.
Absolutely. And, you know, Dishan, as a single woman, I'm looking at your book, your testimony, reading your testimony on paper. And again, for those single women out there who are listening, really listen to us. Let me just go ahead and share some more accolades of Dishan. Okay, listen to this. She did her movie, you guys. Let's get it on. And it garnered the attention of many prominent filmmakers, radio hosts, journalists, magazines, production companies, pastors across the nation. She was even invited to be a guest on The Real Housewives of Atlanta with Candy Burris' show, Candy Coated Nights, to discuss her new groundbreaking genre. And her career was just going off, taking off, and the guy in her life was not valuing her success. That's what I was looking at, Dishan. And another thing, like, the devil doesn't come in your life when you're strong. He's not going to do that. He's going to come to you at your weakest. Of course, that's what he does. And like, if you see a guy, he's ugly and all that, he said the white words, because women, like you said, we're designed to nurture and all that. So that's why growing in college.
I was just going to say that the enemy knows what we like, you know, and when he needs to present it. It was a timing. And in my particular case, my baby is not a mistake. It begins with me talking about growing up needing attention and needing people to affirm me. And so if any problem that I've had, any weakness that I will admit to having, is that there was a time when I was so thirsty for attention that even though the red flags were there, because I was getting attention, I ignored them. And as women, we fall prey to that. We have to have a standard for ourselves. We have to have boundaries. And we have to allow the men to come up to those standards and to those boundaries and not lower ourselves to what they have. And, you know, and if there was in that particular situation, I knew I was lowering myself. I knew I was with someone who didn't really support what I did, didn't believe in what I was doing, but it was the attention that I got when I wanted it that allowed me to answer the phone when I know I shouldn't have answered the phone, you know. And so we tend to lose sight of all of the blessings that we have when we start dealing with in our emotions and dealing in our feelings. So we have to be really, really careful because, as I talk about in the book with Samson and Delilah, Samson, in that particular case, he had it going on in so many words. You know, he didn't need Delilah. He could have had his choice of women. But Samson, when you really look deep into who he was, Samson just wanted to be loved. The Bible talks about his first wife betraying him and going off and marrying his best friend, his best man. Then after her, he went and the Bible says he fell in love with a prostitute.